My name is Mark, a recording angel. I've been observing this earth since the dawn of creation. The Most High has asked me to share my recordings with you. The following are my records of the church's early years and earliest believers, not just adults, but children too, collected in this book, Champions of the King, the Story of the Apostles. If today's recording contains situations which might be uncomfortable for younger listeners, I will mark the video with the words parental guidance recommended. Thaddeus, Damascus. Thaddeus entered the courtyard with a gigantic bundle of reeds balanced on his head. He walked over to where his father was working and then paraded back and forth. "Such poise, such balance, such a large bundle of reeds. Are you lucky to have me for a son or what?" The boy's father looked up and chuckled. "And so brave," he said, "facing all those dangers down there collecting reeds by the river." "Yes," Thaddeus said, being careful not to nod and drop his bundle. "Fearlessly harvesting reeds, caring not for the roars of the hippos or the crocodiles smiling at me from under the water." "Yes, but I've heard the real danger was snakes that get into your bundle and slither down to whisper in your ear as you're walking home." He reached over and tickled Thaddeus's ear from behind with a long blade of grass. With a shriek, the boy dropped his bundle and scratched his ear. "Ha ha! You can scream almost as well as a girl," his father said with a laugh. "That was a terrible thing to do," his son shouted. "Sometimes I think you're the best father in the world, and other times I think you have a rotten streak running through you. But," he winked at his father, "I'm always so glad to have you back." His father put his arm around him. "I'm glad to be back too. So glad." Watching them from above, I nodded. Life was certainly a lot different for this little family since the mighty sun had healed Thaddeus's father of his demon possession. A few years before, Thaddeus and his mother had struggled in poverty, continually facing the possibility of starvation, while his father ran screaming through the cemeteries, demon-possessed, and unaware of his own surroundings most of the time. Now they were a real family. "I love that we're now a whole family," the boy blurted. "Well, son," his father said, smiling, "we're going to be even more of a family yet." What do you mean?" Thaddeus asked, his brow crinkling. "You know, mother, father, brothers, sisters." "Brothers? Sisters?" the boy echoed. "Yes," his father said happily, "your mother's going to have a baby, and you'll have a brother or a sister." Thaddeus frowned. "What's the matter?" "You and mother?" Thaddeus mumbled. "Yes, that's what normal families do. They grow." The boy shuddered. "You know about family stuff," his father continued. "We've talked about that." "Yeah, I know. Other families. But you and mother?" His father laughed again. "Yes, mother and I, just like other families. It will be several months yet, so you have time to get used to the idea and be properly grateful to the Most High when the child actually arrives." The boy nodded slowly, then shook his head. "I was glad that the humans couldn't hear me when I laughed. Human children always seem so shocked that their own parents would have normal feelings and create children just as everyone else does, and Thaddeus was no exception." "Where is mother right now?" he asked. "She's over sweeping the other courtyard." The boy picked up the scattered bundle of reeds from the ground. He had never seen a house with 2 courtyards before they had moved to Damascus. In Gadara, he and his mother had lived in a tiny shack, but many of the more well-to-do pig farmers had homes with courtyards and small rooms built around them. Uncle Judas's house had been like that at one time, and then he had constructed a second courtyard for his inn. The main inn on the road entering Damascus, it had a large courtyard with a sheltering roof along one wall, supported by wooden posts. The shelter had 2 rooms at the very end in case the inn had especially wealthy guests who wanted privacy. The guests who used the shelter received a safe place for them and their animals to sleep overnight. It was enclosed so the animals wouldn't run away and locked securely at the gate so that no one in Damascus would rob them. Back in Gadara, Thaddeus and his family had attracted a lot of attention after Yeshua had healed his father. At first, everyone was amazed to find him clothed and in his right mind, and wanting to continue his life where it had left off before the creeping madness had set in. But the popularity was fleeting, For when Yeshua had cast the spirits out of his father, they had entered a herd of swine up on the hillside. The pigs then ran off a cliff into the Sea of Galilee. Perhaps the demons had stampeded the herd to turn the people against Yeshua. If nothing else, having had the town's economy decimated in a single blow made the local people much less pleased about the healing of Thaddeus' father. Quite frankly, the pigs were more valuable to them, and they became angry. As a result, Thaddeus and his family had to leave. Uncle Judas had invited them to come to his home in Syria. He had offered them a place to stay for as long as they needed at his inn on Straight Street, in exchange for their help with the business. Uncle Judas's wife had recently died, and he had had only daughters. The last one had been married off some years ago, so he had plenty of room and plenty of money, but needed some family and a little help. It was good for all of them, and was working out well. Thaddeus was making new friends and learning some interesting things about Damascus. According to local legend, the city was built on the site where Cain had murdered his brother Abel. When Thaddeus asked how they had kept the site marked even during the Great Flood, everyone just laughed at him and said he would have to ask Noah. Still, it was definitely the spot. Tradition also said that Uz, the grandson of Shem, had built Damascus, and somewhere around here in the land of Uz was where Job had lived. Thaddeus had heard the stories of Job from the rabbi in the synagogue. Even though Damascus was in Syria, it had 30 synagogues in town to accommodate the large Hebrew population. Some Jews had always lived in Damascus. Now, a lot more did. Also, followers of Yeshua had reached Damascus before Thaddeus and his family ever got there, especially since the death of the young deacon Stephen in Jerusalem. The followers of Yeshua had fled the holy city in every direction because of the fierce persecution. The ringleader seemed to be a man people had named Saul the Slayer, or in Jerusalem just referred to as Saul the Slayer. He spearheaded the campaign to ferret out the followers of Yeshua by learning their secrets, finding their hiding places, and then dragging them out and executing them, whether they were men, women, or children. Thaddeus took a deep breath. They were lucky that Uncle Judas lived in Syria. What if their only relatives had lived in Jerusalem? He shuddered. Things were probably worse for followers of Yeshua in Jerusalem than they had been for those in Gadara. He piled the reeds over in the corner where they kept them to dry. We are greatly blessed, he thought to himself, not just to live with Uncle Judas, but also that Mother grew up in a family of basket weavers. And here in Damascus there are 2 rivers with plenty of reeds growing free for anybody who wants them. His family had been able to start a business, and Mother had taught both Thaddeus and his father how to weave baskets. This way, though Uncle Judas was providing them a place to live, they were able to earn their own income and buy the things the family needed. The boy drew another deep breath. Yes, life was good. The clamor at the gate announced the presence of guests.
I need to speak to the innkeeper,
a deep voice shouted from outside.
My name is Judas. I am the keeper of this establishment,
the boy's uncle replied as he opened the gate to reveal a tall man standing there.
How may I help you? We had a problem on the way to Damascus,
the man said,
and we need shelter, some help for this man for a few days.
He gestured towards someone sitting hunched over on the back of a horse.
Our leader will need someone to help him with personal care, while some of us go back to the Sanhedrin and find out what they want to be done now.
I see, said Uncle Judas. Who is your leader?
His name is Saul.
Uncle Judas stared. So did Thaddeus.
Saul of Tarsus? Saul the Slayer?
Uncle Judas stuttered. The name of Saul struck fear into hearts of the followers of Yeshua everywhere. Yet the man on the back of the horse hardly looked fearful himself. He seemed much smaller than one would have imagined him. His shoulders drooped, and he had his headpiece wrapped around his face so no one could see it. But he was obviously either quite ill or extremely distraught.
Bring him in, Uncle Judas said after a long pause. This young man is Thaddeus, and he will care for Saul's needs as long as he stays here. There will be an extra charge, of course, for the personal care, as well as a surcharge for putting him in a room, for I take it you don't want him out in the courtyard alone.
We'll pay whatever you require,
the man answered.
Put him in your best room.
Very good, said Uncle Judas. Bring him this way. Can he speak?
The tall man nodded.
Very well. Place him in here. Thaddeus, you get anything the man asks you for. Then he spoke both to Saul and the other men. Thaddeus is very shy and doesn't speak much. He stared hard at Thaddeus as if to say, For this week at least, please be shy and don't talk. But he will get whatever you need. Thaddeus understood. He helped the men lift Saul from the back of the horse and assist him onto a pallet in the corner of the room, where he curled up in a fetal position and pulled his prayer shawl up over his face. He certainly did not look very frightening. Frightened was more like it. As if reading his mind, the tall man turned to Thaddeus and said,
He is a very powerful man. He's just ill. Sanhedrin sent him here after he dealt with the followers of Yeshua in Jerusalem. Rumor has it that Matthew, one of the 12, has fled here, as well as many other followers.
Thaddeus paled. How could they know about Matthew? Everyone had been extremely careful to keep it a secret. I will bring him some water, the boy said, and some food from the kitchens. Perhaps I will refresh him from his difficult trip. When he returned, the other men in the group had left, and only the tall one with the deep voice remained.
I wanted to make sure you got back before I left, he said.
You're leaving too? No one's going to stay here with Saul?
It's a bit awkward,
the man explained.
I'll tell you a little, though, about what happened, just so you can understand our position. We came here with Saul with the intent of cleaning the followers of Yeshua out of Damascus. However, something happened along the road.
An accident?
No, not exactly. There was a very bright light, a sound like thunder, although there wasn't a cloud in the sky. The light was so bright that it knocked us to the ground and Saul from his horse.
He was hurt in the fall?
No, let me finish,
the man said impatiently.
For a shy child who doesn't talk much, you certainly interrupt.
Thaddeus bowed his head and bit his tongue.
We heard only loud rumbling like thunder, but Saul said that he saw Yeshua himself, and that Yeshua asked him why he was persecuting him. The light had stricken Paul blind, though the rest of us were able to see once it subsided. He feels that Yeshua has punished him. All this time he thought that the deacon Stephen had committed blasphemy by claiming that he had seen Yeshua at the right hand of God, and yet now Saul claims to have seen him too. He doesn't know what to do. Now that he's blind, he feels he'll no longer be of use to the Sanhedrin, and if he tells his story, they may want him killed. Yet if he doesn't share it, he fears something worse might happen to him. He's very ill, and confused, and depressed.
The man shook his head in puzzlement and frustration.
And the rest of us are just afraid, don't know what to do. I'm going to stay in Damascus, but in a different part of the city. And I'll be back to visit, but not unless I know it's safe. If the Sanhedrin decide to come after him, you'll be safe. You just work at the inn. Saul is just your guest, but treat him well, for he's been an important man. Indeed, he's a leading Pharisee and a student of Gamaliel.
I will take good care of him, Thaddeus said cautiously.
Thank you, and I must be going.
He put his hand on the smaller man's shoulder.
I'm leaving now, Saul. I'll be back in a few days.
Saul did not move or say anything. With a shrug, the tall man left. Is there anything I can get for you, sir? Thaddeus asked. Silence. I'm going back to the kitchens for a few minutes, but I will return. Don't worry. We will take good care of you, and everything will be all right.
No,
said the voice under the prayer shawl.
Nothing will ever be all right again.
Honest, Father, it is. It's Saul of Tarsus, Saul the Saint Slayer, right over there, in the other courtyard in one of the rooms. Really? His father said. He must have run out of followers of Yeshua to kill in Jerusalem. Yes, that's what his companion told us, that Saul has official papers from the authorities to extradite fugitive believers. I guess that would be us. Well, he doesn't look as if he could hurt us very badly, Thaddeus commented. That's because he's sick now, his father sighed. He has quite a reputation for cruelty. The tall man said that he's a very important Pharisee. What exactly is a Pharisee? Father took a deep breath. A Pharisee is a very educated Jew who study the traditions of the elders as well as the law of Moses. Their interpretations are different from some of those of the Sadducees. What kinds of interpretations? Oh, I don't know. I'm not very educated in that stuff. But I know that the Pharisees think that the dead will be resurrected, and the Sadducees don't. And the Pharisees believe in angels, and the Sadducees don't. Beyond that, I'm not quite sure. But I bet if you asked our guest when he feels better, he could spend days explaining it to you. Well, right now, he's just curled up with his prayer shawl pulled over his face so that no one can see him. Don't let his looks deceive you, Father said quietly. What I've heard about him is pretty frightening. He may just be acting ill so that we will feel sorry for him and lower our guard until he finds out where everyone is hiding. Then he'll catch all of us. Don't feel sorry for him, no matter how pitiful he acts. And whatever you do, be very careful of what you say. I will, Father. And remember, son, it's never just your life that you protect or endanger. It's also my life and the lives of your mother and our coming baby. I'll be careful. You can trust me. Come here, Thaddeus, Mother called. Please try to feed some of this stew to our guest. He hasn't had any food or drink for some time now. While I'm not fond of the man, I certainly don't want him to die here with us. Maybe he doesn't need food and water, the boy mumbled. Maybe he just lives on anger. He hadn't meant for his mother to hear, but she sighed. Some people seem to, she said. Still, see what you can do. Thaddeus took the tray. The little man shook his head when the boy offered the food. It's been 3 days, Thaddeus said. You haven't had any food or any water. If you don't drink or eat, you will die. That's the general idea, isn't it? Saul replied. He raised up on one elbow. I am being punished. Go away. Leave me alone. The boy shrugged. Well, I know you can't see, he said, but don't you think that if God wanted you to die, he would have just killed you then? You don't understand. I saw Yeshua, the risen Lord, in all of his glory. How could you understand? I saw him in his undergarments, Thaddeus blurted without thinking. In his undergarments? Blasphemy! The blind man swung with his fist. How can you say such things about the Messiah? You blasphemous youth! You should be beaten within an inch of your life. One of his fists connected with the tray, and it went splattering against the wall, lentils running down the doorpost like teardrops. With his other hand, he grabbed Thaddeus by the leg and knocked him to the floor, and began flailing his fists wildly against him. Suddenly, a grip as strong as iron seized Saul's wrist. Not here, he said. Not my son, and not in my home. You're not at the Sanhedrin now. The angry little man stiffened. If you're going to convince him of anything, you're going to have to do it by persuasion, not violence. Thaddeus, his father, continued. You have no jurisdiction here. This is Damascus, remember? That's not true, the angry little Pharisee insisted. I have official papers right here in my pouch. He felt around for it. I have the authority of Rome for extradition of fugitive Jewish believers right here in Damascus. His voice trailed off into silence as he realized he no longer had a pouch. I expect that your traveling companions have made off with it and whatever money you had. Saul pulled his prayer shawl over his head again. Go away, he said distantly. Certainly. Come on, Thaddeus. As they walked out into the courtyard, Thaddeus, his father, looked at his son's face and said, You'll have quite a bruise where he hit you. The boy smiled. I was really happy to see you come when you did. His father's face clouded over. I may not have been there to protect you all those years, my son, but nobody's going to hurt you now.
This broadcast has come from the book Champions of the King by Sally Pierson Dillon, with permission from the Review and Herald Publishing Association. This book and the rest of the series, War of the Ages, can be purchased by going to www.adventistbookcenter.com or by calling 1-800-765-6955. I'm your narrator, Austin Backus, and this audio project is a gift to you from my free Christian book ministry, RXF 1888. Please visit our website, www.rxf1888.com, to request free Christian books for both kids and adults. And join us here again for more stories from Mark the Recording Angel.